What's up, guys?
What's up?
Morning.
Good morning.
How are you guys? How you doing, Tony?
I'm doing well.
Good.
It's a new day. Ready to go.
Keep calm and carry on. I can see it back there.
That's right. I also have one over here. It says now panic and freak out. So
Nice.
got one of both.
Cool. Matt and Jeff, how are you guys?
I'm good.
Yeah?
I could sleep more these days, but I'm good.
Cool. Chris, how you doing? Okay.
Still connecting.
Ah, yes. Luke.
Hello.
007, how are you?
I'm here.
Everybody's got morning voice. Like it.
Yeah, I have morning voice till like 10, so.
Oh, yeah?
Morning, guys.
Cool. Let me just
Morning.
let me pull this up real quick. See who else said they're coming. Yeah. You guys got any fun plans this weekend?
Going to Park City for the week.
Oh, yeah?
Yep.
What are you doing?
What's that?
What are you guys doing there? Just saying. Oh, I think your wife told me you have a timeshare there.
Yeah, we've got a timeshare condo there. Gonna go hang for the week.
That'll be fun.
Yeah.
We'll be in
Very
Park
cool.
City too for a couple days.
Oh, yeah?
What's that?
I'll be in Park City as well for a couple days.
Cool.
Yeah. But everything got canceled. The parade, like it all just falling apart.
It got canceled everywhere, man.
I
I can't
know.
believe it.
Yeah, everywhere's canceled.
Yep.
Yeah, lame.
Lame. Okay, well, so I'm gonna let's just jump in, and whoever comes in comes in. Okay, well, I'm excited about this this topic. I want to kind of outline a few things early on, and then kind of start a discussion. So, right on the workplace, I put connect to clarity. I want to share several things that I've found really valuable for me in my journey, and also have you guys share the things that you're doing that are helping you gain clarity. You know, I think at Rise Week, right, we start to see how we have these stories, these perceptions, these limiting beliefs that guide us, oftentimes in the wrong direction. And I hear a lot of people that trust their feelings for a long, long time, whether it's fear or anxiety or hurt. And as we start to clear the road of that stuff, we start to realize, wow, I shouldn't have been trusting that, that feeling or that thought process. And the challenging part is how do we step outside of it and know that we're actually seeing clearly, right? Thinking clearly. And so a couple things, this concept of connect to clarity, for me, that needs to be like a daily basis kind of thing. I don't do this perfectly, but often it's a first thing in the morning thing. I normally will get up and meditate. I sometimes listen to guided, but a lot of times I'm just like looking in. And I don't do the classic kind of headspace style where it's like, let me check on my breathing, let me check on my body. There's a spiritual aspect of that for me. It's probably mostly checking in on what's my goals, what am I after, and am I on track heading towards that? And so I can get lost in this to-do list. And when I connect to clarity and I look at that list, I can see, oh, hey, I got all these to-do list things that aren't actually heading or taking me in the direction I want to go. And I used to have a hard time like letting go of the to-dos. And this idea of connecting to clarity is getting back with the intention. There's a million things that can come up from day to day that feel like we need to do them or that feel like they're urgent or important. And taking just a little bit of time to go, what's my ultimate goal? What's my goal for today? What's my goal for the week? What's my life goal? And how am I spending my time and my energy? And so at the end of this, I want to do kind of a rise visualization around clarity. But I also think it's valuable for all of us to just take that time of introspection. What is going on for me? Which Rise Week is a ton of that. I don't know how many questions I ask at Rise Week, but it's all geared to stir up what's going on for me. And I think one of the things I'd really encourage is this idea of what stories am I telling myself about myself, about my life, about my wife, right? I may have done this at several Rise Weeks, but I know for sure at one, when we were in the cave, we look at kind of the darkness and the disconnect. And one of the questions I ask is, when I'm in this space, when I'm disconnected from myself, when I'm disconnected from those I care about, what are the stories I tell myself about my wife, right? What's that kind of negative thing I think about her? And it's interesting, I was working with a guy yesterday actually, and he more recently found some clarity around things that have been a problem for 26 years in his marriage. And he told me, he said, I had decided a long time ago that my wife was broken and that I was the strong one. And so every time she expressed a need, he would kind of say, there, broken one. I'm this very loving, great husband because I'm being so patient with broken you. And what he realized was, oh, my wife's been telling me she has a need for 26 years that I've created a story around. And literally, he's like, over the past 2 weeks, he's been operating from a different belief system that's more in line with what his wife has been saying. And everything changed that quickly because he saw things differently. And so I think we need to look for opportunities to have our stories challenged, see if we can get into a new paradigm. So I think finding a regular way to meditate, at this most recent Rise Week, and probably the other ones I've shared, how multiple times a day I take time, and I can do it fairly quickly now, where I can just kind of get intentional. One of my favorite times is when I come home from work and I'm in my driveway. I kind of have to take off like the stress of the day and all the things I heard as a therapist and all of that and go, okay, what comes next? And it's this clarity of what do I want to happen with my children, with my wife. I oftentimes do this when I'm laying in bed next to my kids for a few minutes. I'm there with them, but I'm also, what comes next? How do I want to engage with my wife? And I check what's going on for me. Is there anything I picked up over the last hour with the kids? Am I frustrated? Am I thinking about work? Like, where am I? And so this concept of connecting to clarity, I think it could be a daily thing. And then there's 3 things that I like to rotate on a weekly basis. If I could get them all in a week, awesome, but I often can't. And I learned this early in addiction recovery. This concept that coincides with the different chemicals that are activated by different types of drugs. I won't go into the science of that too much, but I think on a regular basis, part of, for me, this connecting to clarity is I got to do something that is adventurous, something that gets some adrenaline going, something that lifts my spirits. And when let's see, let me admit this, sorry, I'm going. When I get intentional with having some adventure, primarily for me, that's one of the biggest ways to help me feel alive. When I feel alive, I feel like I'm in control or even in power of what comes next. The next one, you guys can write this down if you want. So adventure is one. The next one is rejuvenation. You may call this relaxation, but something that rejuvenates me. Right, this could be any number of things. This could be reading a book. This could be, I don't know, taking a bath or a hot shower, going hot tubbing. This could be getting a massage, but like something that rejuvenates you, right? We get super busy in life. I remember reading this book and a guy said like everybody is busy, 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 but not effective, right? And he talks about we got to get intentional with what we're after, and rather than being busy, can we be effective? And for me, I think that happens when I take some time to slow down and rejuvenate and relax. It's actually interesting to me. I think a lot of people think I'm way busier than I am. Like, I do work hard. I do spend time, working, but I've also cut out time in my life where I can live, right? Where I can have adrenaline and adventure, where I can have rejuvenation. And then the third one is creativity. And for me, creativity, whether it's, drawing or painting or pottery or whatever, right, that activates a different set of neurochemicals, neurotransmitters that helps us think more clearly. It's funny, like when I sit with my daughter or my son and I paint, or even if I color with them, I play Minecraft, to be honest, those things activate a different part of my mind where things become more clear. And so adventure, rejuvenation, creativity on a weekly basis, and maybe you rotate those. Maybe it's once a week you do a hobby in that realm. Maybe you'll find some things that actually can activate all three. But the way these relate to getting chemicals in a healthy way is, right, the adrenaline or the adventure stuff is similar to an upper, like cocaine, like speed, that type of thing. So it's not taking that external drug. That external drug, when it comes in, activates those type of chemicals internally. And so we can do this intentionally in a positive way. If you're looking at this, and right, I mentioned this for me came from a standpoint of addiction recovery. The rejuvenation, the relaxation was more similar to the counter. Alcohol, um, what else is in there? Heroin, those types of drugs activate those type of neurotransmitters. And the creativity is going to be fantasy drugs like marijuana, mushrooms, those types of things. And one of the things that I learned early on, and obviously this isn't all about recovery, but for me, my struggles with addiction were activating all three of those in various ways. And so I had to learn to be intentional with that. And I think what's interesting is what we're finding, when we look at around us, is a lot of people are numb. They're just numb. And they might get a little bit of excitement through porn or Netflix or getting a dopamine hit from a post on Instagram or whatever. But it's fleeting, right? And so I think being intentional with these other things of, I want some feel goods, and I'm going to take some time to live in a way that I get those. I have a couple more thoughts, but up to this point, I wanted to just ask you guys, what are you finding that helps in this area of getting clarity about your life, about your relationships, about your work, your family?
So first of all, Chris, if you can mute just because there's a lot of background noise, that would be awesome. Not Chris narrating the other Chris. For me, it's hard to remember to do, but once I do that Headspace app, and it was hard for a while to get started, but like anything else, once you do it a million times, it becomes habit. So for lunchtime, since my work, I'm kind of all over the place. Just around lunchtime is when I go, I'm gonna do a 10-minute meditation. And that totally helps, as well as Austin, what he said a long time ago was when you get home from the driveway, that kind of 30-second type change your frame of mind, that helps a lot. So thanks for that.
Cool. Yeah, of course. What else, guys?
I'm sorry, Austin, I missed the first part. You said creativity, rejuvenation, and what was the third one?
Adventure. or adrenaline. Sometimes I need my adventure to have adrenaline. Most of the time I need my adventure to have adrenaline.
Yeah, I think for me, you list those things, and then for all of them, I think mountain biking every time. It's like for me to get clarity, I go mountain biking, and I feel like I can think about things more clearly. It rejuvenates me, it relaxes me, and then it also provides that adrenaline for me. I find I need a high dose of that. If I'm not doing something at least once a week that's like providing that adrenaline for me, that's when things go bad for me. I start searching for it in other ways, and like you're saying, the other ways to get a dopamine hit, and it's usually not connection or love or anything helpful. So yeah, just being outside, and I like what you said in the beginning with the meditation. Clarity isn't like a headspace thing, which I did do that for a long time, and I like those types of things to like calm and breathe and like connect with yourself and slow down. But at the same time, it becomes more like a chore or something to do on like a checklist type thing. And I found I do a lot better adding things to my day that are more natural things, if that makes sense. More just something that's would normally be a part, but just being more intentional with the regular activities of the day.
Right. As you talk about that, what comes to mind, there's a book called Essentialism. It's one of my favorite books, and there's a chapter called Edit. And he talks of how one of the best skills we can have is to be able to edit our lives, to look at where things are at, to see what's in front of us, and edit it. He talks of one of the hardest things for people is there's so many opportunities, and sometimes we get lost in trying to do all of them. It's been really interesting for me in my therapeutic career and in building the Rise. There's a whole bunch of different places these things could go. There's different areas I could help in. There's different things I could create. And for me, it's whittling down on, here's all the possibilities. What's important to me? What do I want? How do I want to spend my time? And I've gotten lost at times, both professionally and personally, in spending my energy and my time heading in a direction that wasn't aligned with my goals, right? And so being able to edit and cut out kind of all the extra. And I think looking at that in your personal growth, in your relational growth, what are the things we're doing that aren't actually bringing us where we want to go? So me and my wife, like a lot of couples, got caught up in the default of watching TV at night, right? Sometimes several hours, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing, but is that how we want to spend our time? Is that connecting, right? And I think being intentional is so much of the goal. And so I like this idea of, on a regular basis, almost editing life. Like, okay, what's the story that's happening? Can I change that? Can I redirect that? Can I cut that out, right? The other thing, and we hear a lot about this, and so I don't want you to tune it out when I say it, okay? Because I want to talk about it on a way to use it purposely, which I think is missed often. We hear a lot about journaling and the value of writing things down. I'm a big journaler. I have been for a long, long time. What's interesting about my journals is if I go back through them, there's not a lot of variation, to be honest, in the writing. Very commonly, and I'll write day-to-day type stuff, but very commonly, if you flip through 15 pages, probably 5 of those would be, here's what I'm after, here's what I want, here's what I'm trying to do to get there. It's this kind of focused idea. And as I go back through it, and it's not like intentional, I haven't set a goal of like, I'm going to write this stuff down every 3 days or whatever. It's what's in my mind. the goal, the desire for life, what's in the way, how do I navigate around that? So when we bring this back to connecting to clarity, our journals can be a great way rereading them, or just doing a mind dump and going, okay, what's here? Sometimes I just mind dump and I'm like, wow, there's a lot going on for me. I got to navigate through this stuff because it's getting in my way. And so being very purposeful with journaling. Some people do a gratitude journal. That's great, right? That connects you to the good things you have in your life, which can bring a lot of clarity, right? When we're feeling like victim or drama and like, oh, poor me, right? We can look and go, you know what? There's actually a lot of good here if we're doing that gratitude style thing. One of the things I'm going to start pretty soon is sharing. I've done a little bit of this kind of testing the waters, but I'm going to start sharing questions on a regular basis that taking 5 minutes. Luke and I have done quite a bit of this in the past. Him and I both saw a guy that created an 18-month program, and part of that program was a daily question that activates what's going on in the unconscious mind. And it starts to retrain the mind to think a little differently. And it asks us to see the question and to write 10 answers to it. And right, you kind of have your conscious thoughts, unconscious. You start to tap into that, and it starts to expand the possibilities. And when we're doing that on a regular basis in a journal through a question, in life, I think we start to do that more and more, where our unconscious mind can expand those possibilities. And so I encourage each of you to create in your day, maybe multiple times, to connect to clarity. I've found for me that if I do it multiple times a day, that's best. I really like to start my morning with some clarity, looking internally, and I'll share kind of my full morning routine at another time. But I remember a client of mine. He was a pretty high-powered lawyer in Las Vegas, and at his firm, he was the only one that could do his specific aspect of the job. And he told me, he said, Austin, he's like, I never have less than 25 files on my desk. He's like, and I have to read through all these contracts and make sure they're right. And if I make a mistake, it could be hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, right? He said, so there's always this pressure on me. Doesn't matter how long I work, I'm not going to get it done ever, right? He also had 2 autistic children at home that were in their teenage years, and they were violent. They would hit themselves, light things on fire, attack his wife. And so he's like, my life is constant stress. And he would push. And then he'd go on like a binge for a week of, what was interesting is it started with news, and then it would end with pornography or some type of sexual behavior. And then he'd come back to himself and he'd push, right? And one of the really simple things we worked on was we need to take time multiple times a day for you to like rejuvenate, even if it's 15 minutes. And he's like, I can't take 15 minutes. I was like, dude, you take a week when things get too bad. Why don't we space that out to 15-minute increments every couple of hours? And find some things that rejuvenate you, that bring in some adrenaline in some healthy ways, that are creative. We talked about the concept of when you pull in the driveway, he would say, I'm walking into a war zone. Like, my wife's upset, my kid, and he's like, I can't beat them. He was being honest. He's like, I want to beat the crap out of them. It pisses me off, right? I can't do that. And so he learned I gotta take some time to know what I'm going into. Before he goes into work, I know what I'm going into. Before I get home, I know what I'm going into. And I think that if we're living that way, we run into less problems, we feel more focused, and we create the life we're after. So how many of you have noticed times in life where it's almost on default mode and life does not look like what you planned on? Yeah. What was that like, Chris?
Oh, we always have all the best laid out plans that what we want to accomplish, and it never turns out what's right. Like this weekend, we were supposed to go camping in our trailer, and the jack broke and the water pump went out, and all of a sudden we're not camping this weekend. I'm fixing the trailer. And so instead of letting that try to like control me, it's like, okay, what can we do instead? How is this actually a blessing? So
Right.
life never happens as we ever intend, especially at, when it rains, it pours.
Right. How about for you, Matt? One of the things that I think of for you is like you had a vision of what you wanted to accomplish in your physical health, right? And I imagine that you had to keep coming back to clarity of what am I after to stay with those efforts. Is that accurate?
Yeah, first I didn't have a vision. I didn't know it was possible.
Right. Okay.
And as I've continued to go, as I start to see progress and I start to drop the weight, I get comfortable and I start to think I'm done. I'm okay. I'm good. And then so I have to keep tuning in pretty regularly to say, okay, yes, I'm good. I'm happy. I'm great, but I'm not as well as I could be in the end. And I have to keep telling myself, okay, keep going. There's no
Right.
reason to stop right now. So it's basically a daily reminder of why I'm doing this for me and for my family and to show up for life again on a
Right.
pretty consistent basis.
Right. Yeah.
And I go through these waves, like I said, where just a couple weeks ago I was thinking I could be done. I'm happy with where I'm at. But again, then I think back too, that makes me think, then I'm just giving up again, like I had done so many times before, because I'm not hitting my goal if I stop right now. I'm not getting to the point I thought I could or I wanted to, and given up. So it's a constant recommitment every day to make sure I'm doing what I want to get there.
Right. I think that concept of vision, right? Where am I going? Many guys that come to Rise Week kind of don't know what they want out of life. They don't know who they are. They don't know what they're capable of. They don't know what's possible, right? And one of the big goals of Rise Week is to reconnect to that. Who am I? What is my worth? What am I capable of? What do I want in my marriage, right? So often we accept life as less than what we want, just believing that's how it is, right? And then when we get back to this concept of clarity, I think it's valuable to ask this question, what do I want? And gaining clarity on that, clarity on how am I going to get there? And sometimes those answers come outside of us. We have to ask others who have been there, who have walked that road. Chris Hoy, you there still?
Yeah, I'm still here.
I remember there was a point at this last Rise Week, day 4 on the mountain, where it seemed that you got a lot of clarity, almost reconnected to something you had in the past, right? You said, I know what it takes, right? I know what it's like. I've been there.
Yeah.
And then you went up the mountain, right? What was that for you where you realized, I don't know, maybe that clarity of, hey, this is possible?
It's, for me, it was a lot of focus of I've had a vision and of what my life was going to be like before, and that all just kind of came into view, pinpointed as to what I wanted and how to get to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a motivation. It's a daily focus, a daily effort, never losing track of what it is that I want. It's still a lot of times what I've noticed is within my own relationship, the challenges of day to day, of the stresses of just living, seem to cloud and obscure that end goal. So that's a struggle. Just because, if I let the stress of being a father of so many kids, of being pulled into work for 55, 60 hours a week, cloud what it is that we're trying to build, it can easily get lost. And so, for me, it's just a constant, regrouping, refocusing on what it is that we're trying to do.
Right. Right. I think that what comes to mind as you talk about that is finding these numerous ways that help us see clearly. The books that I choose to read are in line with keeping that active in my mind. The pictures I keep around, the hobbies I do, like, right, they're intentional to help gain that clarity. Um, so what you're saying, Chris, right? Like, I have this vision, but life can creep in and get in the way. And I think that's a lot of us, right? I think that happens pretty easily. I oftentimes find myself really excited about an idea, and I start like investing in that, my energy, sometimes for days, sometimes for weeks. And I kind of work through it and I go, oh, this isn't actually the life that I want, or this, like the end goal I want. I actually don't want to take all this time to do this because in the long run, it's not going to get me what I want. Hey, Chris, can you put yourself on mute again? Sorry, it's, there you go. So for you guys, kind of when we look at this idea of like the Rise way of life, creating space in your schedule to be intentional with clarity and to reconnect, right? That concept is reconnect to clarity or connect to clarity. I would say all areas of life, personal growth and development, marriage, parenting, business, spirituality, sexuality maybe, right? What is it that I like and how am I going to get there? And then the last piece I wanted to talk with you guys was this idea of letting go of form, this idea of flexibility in the path. And so I've had certain things that I want to accomplish, things that are important to me, and I have in my mind kind of this limited path of how to get there. And it's not always a straight line. This idea of letting go of form and being flexible means I don't always know the steps to take, and so it's okay if it doesn't happen the exact way I wanted. So I used to think in my marriage there was this very specific way where I'd be happy in our marriage. And I always thought it was like in the future, far away. And as I let go of form, I started to realize I can have that now. It might not be in the way that I wanted it, but I can still have it now. And it doesn't have to be a far away thing. And so this idea of, flexibility, when you look at the future, expand maybe the potential of how to get there. This is where it's really valuable to talk with each other, right? I might have my limited thoughts of, hey, this is how I can get where I want to go. And Luke or Tony or Matt could say, what about this? Right? Hey, have you thought about this? Oh, no, that wasn't in my thought process. And so the other piece of connecting to clarity obviously can include others. This can include God. This can include your spouse. This can include your children, your friends, your family, your Rise brothers, right? And I think as men, a lot of times we do it on our own. And if I'm honest with myself, my thoughts aren't always directing me in the best place, right? My limited ideas might be good, but there might be another piece of information right around the corner if I'll open up and share kind of what I'm after. Any thoughts on this, guys, that come up for you when we talk of connecting to clarity?
I really like what you just said there about losing that form. That's kind of what I was trying to say in that post. So, Jeff, if you can hear, maybe I can clarify this a little more. Like I said, it made a lot more sense in my head. So, like I saw this on a poster, and it had a picture of Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego on one side, and then it had a picture of Abinadi right next to it, and at the bottom it said, "But if not," basically saying, here's two very similar stories of persecution of guys that were put to the flames, and the outcomes were contrasted completely different, right? Like Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego were saved from the fire. They came out of the flames. They walked out of it, and Abinadi burned till he died. And so it's like, here's two completely different outcomes of very similar stories, And I think the meaning of that is that that happens in our lives as well. You know, is that to say that Abinadi had less faith or he did something wrong for his outcome to be different? No, there was no difference in them and what they had to give and at their purpose. They were both, you know, all of them were very driven, but they had a different outcome. And I think we get this idea in our heads that if we do something very specifically, very purposefully, very, you know, accurate and just putting all our heart into it is great. But sometimes we get caught up in getting the outcome that we want. And that's not always going to be the case. Sometimes the outcome needs to be different for us. I've seen people try and try and try and give it their best and fail, and they go, well, I did my best and it still didn't work. It's like, well, maybe that wasn't the outcome that was meant for you, and for whatever reason. So that's the question to you. If it's not, you know, are you willing to work for it to get this reward? But what if you still don't get the reward? Or what if the reward that you plan and think and have in your mind is not the reward that is meant for you? There's something else that's meant for you. Are you going to be okay with it? And I saw that probably 10 years ago. I saw that poster, that meme thing, and thought, wow, it really made me think and reflect. And then I was just reading a book recently, and the author brought that very thing up again. He said, you know, it's not always going to turn out like you expect. And there was some studies done on that, and actually people who were interviewed that were happy, it wasn't that they had achieved a certain success and that they had gotten a certain amount of money or certain things or even a certain place in the relationship. What the happiness was attached to was their expectation. And he said it was actually because they had low expectation. He said, I don't want to give the idea that you just say whatever happens and you have this low expectation. But he said, it's true. Like whenever your expectations are very, very specific, you're pretty much setting yourself up for disappointment, because life has so many different things. And just like you said, bringing it up to other people helps kind of broaden that spectrum of what you see. And I think that's the danger that gets caught up in our busy lives and our day-to-day of just doing all we can, is we get this hyper focus on an outcome and an expectation to happen a certain way. And then when it doesn't, we are exhausted and burn out on well, why am I trying so hard if I'm not getting this? Instead of being well, this is the way it was meant to be. And just kind of a quick story that he related. He said there was a farmer, and he had this prize stallion, and it ran off. And his neighbor said, oh man, you lost your best horse. How unlucky. Sorry about that. And he said, lucky, maybe not. We'll see. And then the next day the horse came back, and it brought with it 3 mares. And the neighbor said, oh wow, your prize horse came back and it brought with it 3 mares. Now you have 4 horses. How lucky. And the farmer said, maybe not. We'll see. Well, his son was trying to break the new wild mare and got bucked off and broke his leg. And the neighbor said, oh, how unfortunate. Your son broke his leg. I'm sorry about that. How unlucky. And farmer said, maybe not. We'll see. 2 weeks later, the cavalry came through and were recruiting all able men to go to war. And they said, oh, but your son can't go because he's got a broken leg. And the soldiers left him behind. And the neighbor said, oh, your son was spared. How fortunate. And the farmer said, maybe not. We'll see. And that's where he ended it. I don't know what the final thought is on that, but that's the point, is that if you look at what's happening to you instead of immediately judging it and saying, oh man, I've got terrible luck, or oh, I can't do this, oh, I'm gonna fail, or oh, or even so much of like, oh great, yeah, I know what I'm doing, oh yeah, I'm the best, oh I got this. Whatever comes to you, saying maybe, maybe not, we'll see, and just kind of taking it as that's how it was planned for you, and seeing the good in what happens, and just moving forward, clenching to your heart. I think for me that's the paramount thought of Rise, is connecting to your heart, because that's the only thing that's constant, and having that trust in yourself. Everything else that happens can be lucky or unlucky, maybe not, we'll see. So hopefully that makes more sense now.
Right. Thanks, Luke. You know,
Sure. Well, go ahead.
You're good.
I also want to talk a little bit about, you mentioned letting go form the flexibility of path. And it's really trying to take a deeper look on why is it we want that specific goal. My wife and I would listen to a bunch of Tony Robbins lately, and he talked about how he wanted to be a rock star and he wanted to be a baseball player. And he started looking deeper into why did he want that? He wanted to fill stadiums of 20,000 people and let them, to empower them, to excite them, to give them energy. And he wanted them to walk away with an experience. And I mean, we all know now that Tony Robbins, he's not a baseball player. He's not a world famous rock star. But yet he still fills stadiums of 20,000 people plus. He still gives these experiences to people that lift them up and become empowered. And, with our goals, we have to look on why is it we want a specific outcome. Some guys, they may say, I want to be that family that goes to Disneyland 3 times a year. Well, maybe their family, they don't love Disneyland. Maybe they don't like the crowds and the heat. And really what he's searching for, he just wants quality time to build memories with his family. And so that's the flexibility of form. Don't just focus on being that Disneyland family. Focus on, why do you want that Disneyland family, and what do you want your family to take away with it? And that's the flexibility of form, is that it's not about envisioning what you're going to accomplish or achieve. It's why you want that outcome, and being open to how to obtain that outcome, even though it may not be what you originally planned on.
Good thoughts, guys. Yeah, it's interesting because, right, how many people, let's just look at, let's look at like a church experience for a minute, right? What would be the goal of some people, right? I want to feel more spiritual. I want to feel more connected. I want to be more connected as a family. And then everybody's pissed off getting ready for church. Parents are yelling, right? Kids are crying. It's like, wait, are we reaching the goal? No, we got to church. Now everybody's frustrated kind of situation, right? You look at the same scenario with like a family trip. We're going on a family trip and now I'm pissed off and I'm yelling at you in the car like, okay, we're here at Disneyland or camping, but now we're all miserable, right? So we have to keep in mind, what are our intentions? What are our goals? The last thought I want to share is there was a time where I realized I don't feel lovable. My wife and I had a lot of conversations where I would accuse her of not loving me. And she said, I do love you and I show you often, and it's frustrating that you don't feel it, right? So I got a journal. I can't remember, I did this for several months. And throughout the day, I would look for evidence that she loved me. And I would write things like, this seems like love. Why don't I feel it? She did this. Why doesn't that count? And I started to expand, right, what felt like love for me. And I had to do it intentionally. I had to look for that evidence of love, of care. And I think that goes in line with our stories. Sometimes we can miss things that are happening. We don't see clearly as we think we do often, and we miss things. And so again, going back to this idea of clarity in your relationships, with your wife, with your children, with your business people, taking this time to look at what's actually happening. Is there love here? Is there care here? Maybe I don't feel it, but does it appear that they're trying to send that message? And I think we want to gain that clarity of what we have. And so often, honestly, I think we have what we want and need, and we're missing it because we're disconnected from ourselves. We're not gaining that clarity. So take some time this weekend to maybe think of ways that you can build this in on a regular basis. Quick recap: adventure, creativity, rejuvenation. I recommend that on a weekly basis. Daily gaining clarity through meditation, introspection, through journaling, and being intentional, ongoing with getting clarity. What's my purpose? What do I want? How do I want to, live my life? And what do I want those around me to experience? So we'll end, if you guys are game, we'll do a quick little visualization. If you guys want, you can close your eyes for a second. And I want you to just slowly bring into your mind this idea of a dark night. And as you picture the darkness, noticing that even in the darkness, there are still bits of light. Even now with your eyes closed, if you look up to the left, you'll see bits of light. And as you envision the darkness, I'd like you to begin to notice the sun's first rays. They're not coming over the mountain. They're not fully visible, but you're noticing an increase in light in your surroundings. And I want you to begin to get a sense that in front of you is the life and the love and the joy and the connection that you want, but you can't yet clearly see it. But you get a sense that it's there. And I'd like you to allow the light to begin to increase, where it's replacing the dark, and you're beginning to see more clearly in front of you the life that you want, the goals, the dreams, the connections. And allow your mind to see, hear, feel, clarity. And as you begin to gain clarity, I want you to narrow in specifically on this morning. What can you do in the next 10 minutes that gets you a little bit closer to what you seek? Noticing that oftentimes there are simple things that can be done that make a big impact. What can I do now that brings me power, that brings me connection, that helps me get into a state that is empowered? What can I do to interact with those I love in a way that inspires or uplifts them? And then begin to see the rest of your day unfold. weaving through the busyness into effectiveness. How can I use my time, my energy to be effective? And expanding your mind to clarity on the weekend you'd like to have. Celebrating, connecting, learning, growing, giving, and seeing in front of you the steps to take to create the morning, the day, the weekend you'd like to have. Locking in your mind clarity and the intention to do the things that someone like you does because of who you're being. And quickly gaining clarity on who you are being. Seeing yourself clearly as a man, as a husband, as a father, as a provider, and getting in tune with your purpose. Getting in tune with your power to act. Noticing how quickly clarity can come when you seek it. And when you're ready, come back into the room. Matt, you okay just sharing what came from that for you?
I think that's what I'm trying to figure out, what just came from that for me. I realized I had a hard time connecting at first with getting into this whole visualization, just because of stuff going on in other parts of the house, and I kept getting distracted. And at first, I was starting to get annoyed actually with my wife and the dog that are in the living room, and realized as I was starting to get in this place and those distractions were there, it was exactly what I wanted. Opposite was to be able to connect and not let those things happen and not let those affect me. So as I kind of worked through that and started to think about some of this stuff, it really just kind of put things into a little different perspective. I mean, literally within that 30 seconds of going from irritated to not, of how quickly you could shift that by just changing one simple thought there. So I think that was a good realization for me. I don't know that I tuned in quite as much as I was supposed to with that visualization you were hoping for, but that's what happened.
So you got what you needed, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so right, I think this idea of connecting to clarity, I invite you guys to look at how do I do this on a regular basis, where I'm getting clear on me, where I'm connecting to my core, the things that I value the most, and using my being to create that. Okay, so we'll do another Rise Council probably within a week. I'm still trying to find the right time of day and things like that, which may be impossible for everybody, but I appreciate you guys being here. I have some things that I'll share in another video, kind of this next phase of the Rise that I've been working on. I won't do that here, but I think there's some cool things coming up that I think you guys will enjoy, and it will be helpful for other people that you care about that you know could use some strengthening. So thanks, guys. We'll
Hey, Austin,
see each other
can I
again
ask you a question real quick?
Oh yeah, sure.
When you talk about the three things to kind of get you get you kind of going each week with the adrenaline and rejuvenation and creativity. Do you ever find that one of those is more off balance than the rest? I mean,
Sure.
with my work, creativity is something I do every day. I mean, as an
Right.
architect, I'm constantly being creative. And so I don't feel like that's an outlet to kind of recenter me anymore. It used to be when I was younger,
Right.
but what if it's not?
Yeah. Well, I would say finding different ways to be creative, because I think whenever it's compelled, right, when you're compelled to be creative, it's not the same. And so, right, like I'm often doing creative things with my work, thinking through things, and I don't always find that super valuable. Sometimes I need to go home and color with my daughter, or right. Sometimes for me, it's actually listening to music feels that similar thing for me. It's someone else's creativity. And so I think looking at that, if I'm compelled or right, it's my job to be creative, that doesn't bring the benefit because inherently there's some pressure around that. So yeah, I'd look at some other outlets. You know, maybe you pick up a guitar, maybe you pick up a pencil, right? Maybe you write a short story or whatever. But I think the end goal is not creativity for creativity's sake or adventure for adventure's sake. What's the goal here? So I used to go backpacking and come home kind of a jerk. I was exhausted from 30 or 50 miles of hiking, and I felt like, oh, I just backpacked and I was grumpy, right? Well, that wasn't the goal. The goal was to go and gain my strength and come back a better man. And so I have to be intentional, right? My wife would be like, geez, you just went for 5 days and you come back and you're not being very, helpful. So this last trip I did a couple-day trip, and my wife was with the kids for a few days, and I came back with the intention of I'm gonna help around the house. I'm gonna give her some time to be alone, where I have the kids, kind of thing, right? And so I think again, what's the purpose? It's not just adrenaline or creativity just to do it. That's something that I think if we can tie in. If I'm getting into adrenaline or creativity or rejuvenation, can I use that in my day-to-day life? Does that make sense, guys? Good question.
Yeah, good question.
Cool.
You know,
All right, guys. Oh, go ahead.
I was in a creative arts class at the university and talking about creativity and rejuvenation. Sometimes the way to gauge it is, am I doing this because I want to, or am I doing this because it needs to get done?
Right.
And so really, for example, are you reading this book because you generally want to read it, or are you reading this because you feel obligated to report back to a team that you read this book, or you have to pull some principles to better yourself? It really comes down to the intention of, am I doing this because I want to, or am I doing this because I really should or I need to?
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I'll be really transparent with you guys. The Rise stuff wasn't working for me when I needed it financially. I had a lot of, like, I had stepped away from therapy, and it was like my new career was to build the Rise, and I couldn't do it when it had that pressure around it, because the Rise is it's creative. I took a long time to think and create. And when the goal was, how do I empower people? How do I strengthen people? And how do I have a business that lifts me, right? That freed things up a lot, where creativity could flow and there wasn't these compelling things. So when I rebuilt a practice, that's what we live off of, is off of my practice. The Rise stuff is what I want to do. It's what I like to do. I like to empower men. I like to strengthen them. I use a lot of my therapeutic type stuff. But for me, it's not this, I got to make money thing, right? And I think that goes in line with what you're talking about, Chris, where when we have to, it can limit the value of it in different areas of our life. So other thoughts, guys? Any other questions for today before we end? Okay, cool. Well, I appreciate you guys, and we'll see you on Workplace.
Yeah, sounds good. Good to see you guys.
Cool. We'll see you guys later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.